Right now, as you listen to my voice, your jaw muscles are, well, they're likely receiving these microscopic, completely unconscious commands.
Right.
Commands to silently speak the exact words that I am saying. So you are just passively listening. Your brain is physically rehearsing my sentences in the background.
Yeah, it's wild.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are exploring a process you use constantly, every single day, but are completely blind to.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at the hidden architecture of meaning that fires up every time you encounter a single word. And to do this, we've got an amazing stack of sources today.
We do.
We're pulling from excerpts from Dick Kuiken's book, The Mystery of Life and Consciousness, and we're pairing that with two massive scientific papers.
Right, the Nature and PNAS papers.
Exactly. One from Nature by Hookuth and colleagues on semantic brain maps, and another from PNAS by Vittoria Piai's team on how language and memory interact. So if you've ever wondered how your brain actually processes words, we are going to give you some major aha moments today.
Yeah, we're really looking at a fundamental shift in how we understand human cognition here. I mean, the overarching premise across all this research is that words are not just passive labels.
Right, they aren't just sticky notes we put on things.
Exactly. They aren't just labels we assign to the world. They are highly volatile triggers. A single word activates a massive unconscious web of memories.
Mhm.
And by doing that, it effectively generates a customized virtual reality in your mind in real time.
Okay, so let's start with the sheer biological power of just naming something.
Hmm.
Because Kuiken brings up this brilliant contrast. He talks about how a dog perceives a passing car at night versus how a human does.
Yeah, that's a great example to start with.
Right, because a dog just looks at the front of the car and processes these bright, glaring spots. To the dog, it's just a visual characteristic of this large, moving metal object.
Just raw sensory data.
Exactly. But because we possess language, we isolate those bright spots and assign them a specific name. We call them headlights. We literally carve them out of the environment as independent objects just by naming them.
And that act of isolation, that is the evolutionary leap right there. Giving those bright spots a name leads to what researchers call virtual recognition.
Virtual recognition.
Yeah, because you have a specific linguistic trigger for the concept of headlights, you can, manipulate that concept. You can think about it, analyze its properties.
Without needing a physical car sitting right in front of you.
Exactly. It's the catalyst that really drove the expansion of our complex cortical networks. It's why our brains got so large.
So if I'm learning a totally new concept from scratch, like let's use Kuiken's banana example. My brain is essentially building a new circuit to support that virtual recognition.
Precisely. Just think about the very first time you ever encountered a banana.
Okay.
Your brain forms a dual memory. So first, you capture the sensory data.
Like the yellow color, the curved shape.
Yeah, the visual shape, that specific shade of yellow, the smooth texture of the peel, the sweet taste, all of that. And at the exact same time, you hear the phonetic clatter of the word banana.
Oh, I see.
So your brain wires those two distinct memories, the rich sensory experience and the auditory sound, into a single integrated network.
Okay, so when I read the word banana later on a grocery list, my brain is basically playing a cohesive little movie of a banana in my head.
Well, no, not quite a cohesive movie. It's actually much more fragmented and mechanical than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're getting a rapid-fire unconscious activation of those individual sensory traits, and it's all driven by constant feedback loops.
Feedback loops. How fast are we talking?
Really fast. When you process normal visual input, like just looking out a window, your brain runs feedback loops comparing perception to memory at about 30 to 100 cycles per second.
Wow, okay.
But when you read a word, that bottom-up and top-down cycling slows way down. It drops to about 10 to 30 times per second.
Wait, that's a massive drop in processing speed.
Yeah.
Why does language slow the brain down so dramatically compared to just looking at a tree or something?
It really just comes down to computational load. I mean, visual processing is direct. You are matching a shape to a shape.
Right.
But reading requires translation. You are forcing the brain to bridge this massive gap between an abstract, sterile symbol on a piece of paper and a deeply embedded multisensory memory network.
That makes sense.
Every single second you focus on the word banana, your brain fires a signal from the visual text up to the overarching concept, and then it fires back down to the specific memories of the taste, the color, and the sound.
And that heavy translation step is what creates the computational drag.
Exactly.
Wait, hold on, though. If my brain is cycling 30 times a second, pulling up the deep sensory memory of smelling and tasting a banana just because I read the word on a page,
Yeah.
Why am I not hallucinating the taste of fruit right now? Like, why am I only conscious of the black and white text?
That is the big question. And it's because consciousness, at least in this framework, requires a very specific trigger.
Okay.
By default, all these intricate memory networks are perfectly tuned and aligned. And because they are in perfect alignment, their activity remains entirely unconscious.
So they're running in the background.
Right. For a memory to actually pierce through that threshold into conscious perception, there has to be fresh sensory input that actively alters it.
So the data coming in through my eyes is the key here.
Yes. When you look at the word banana, the visual input of the ink on the page alters that specific part of the memory network. That fresh sensory modification is what makes the word itself conscious to you.
But the rest of the network, the smell, the taste, the texture, that isn't receiving any new sensory input from the paper.
Exactly. So it stays in the dark, it is highly active, it's cycling furiously to give the word meaning, but it remains just below your conscious awareness.
Which completely undermines direct reference theory.
Oh, completely.
Because we used to think that the meaning of a word was simply the physical object it points to in the real world. Right.
Yeah.
Like you point to a bicycle, you say bicycle, and the meaning somehow lives in the metal frame and the rubber tires.
Yeah, and our sources show how utterly inadequate that theory really is because without your unconscious mental background, the word is just empty noise.
Right.
If you strip away your embedded unconscious memories of, trying to balance the feeling of the pedals, the momentum, the word bicycle holds no actual meaning.
The meaning doesn't live out there in the world. It is generated internally by your unconscious network.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if meaning is generated entirely by these unconscious loops, it completely changes how we view our own speech.
It does.
I mean, the phrase, "I decide what I say," feels like the most undeniable truth of the human experience. But this research argues that conscious control over our vocabulary is largely an illusion.
It is deeply counterintuitive, I know. We naturally assume speaking is this process of conscious selection. Like we're scanning a mental dictionary and carefully picking the best verbs and nouns to build a sentence.
Right, like ordering off a menu.
Yeah, exactly. But the reality is that our conscious thoughts are merely vague mental intentions. When you feel the urge to communicate a point, your prefrontal cortex instantly and completely unconsciously begins selecting the vocabulary and organizing the syntax.
Wow. So it's not like consciously picking items off a menu at all. It's more like tipping the first domino of an intention,
Yeah.
and the brain automatically sets up all the grammar and vocabulary before the final domino even falls.
That's a perfect analogy. The brain handles the assembly entirely out of sight, and once that grammatical avalanche is organized, the prefrontal cortex sends the finalized data to your premotor memories.
Premotor memories.
Yeah. Think of it as a choreography sheet. It dictates the microscopic, highly specific sequences of muscle activations required to speak.
Like physically moving your mouth.
Right. How your lungs need to push air, the exact tension of your vocal cords, exactly where your tongue must strike the roof of your mouth.
And according to the text, it is only at this incredibly late stage, like right during this premotor activity, that the words finally become conscious to us.
That is the defining moment. You do not consciously assemble the sentence. You only become conscious of the sentence once your brain cues up the physical muscles to say it out loud.
That is wild.
You are literally experiencing the final output of an unconscious assembly line.
Which completely explains the inner voice, because when I am reading a book silently to myself, I still, quote-unquote, hear the words in my head.
Right.
I'm not moving my jaw, but the words are definitely conscious.
And that's because you are activating the exact same premotor choreography. Your brain is preparing the tongue and lip movements required to speak the text, which is what brings the words into your consciousness.
Even if I don't open my mouth.
Right. The only difference between talking to yourself silently and speaking aloud is that during silent reading, the final neural switch that physically triggers the muscle movement is just blocked.
So the dress rehearsal happens, which makes it conscious, but the curtain never rises on the actual physical movement.
Exactly.
Okay, so if speaking is just launching these unconscious memory dominoes, what happens when we flip the dynamic? Like, what happens when we are listening to a story?
Well, we shift from unconscious assembly to unconscious generation. Let's look at the example Kuiken provides in the text. The sentence is, a camel tour around the Pyramid of Giza.
Okay. It's just a 9-word sentence. Very straightforward.
It is. But what's fascinating here is what your brain does in the milliseconds after processing those 9 words. You automatically generate an entire environment.
Oh,
You likely pictured sand, right? You felt the heat of the sun. You might have imagined other tourists walking around. And none of those elements were in the sentence.
I definitely pictured the sky being this blinding bright blue.
Because a story or a sentence is never just a transfer of raw data. It is a prompt for a virtual event. You can only comprehend that sentence by relying on a massive reserve of prior knowledge to fill in those expectation patterns.
So the words are just cues.
Right. The 9 words are merely triggers that tell your brain which personal memory networks to activate. You are an active co-creator of the sentence. Your pyramids are built from your own unique archive of photographs, movies, and experiences.
This maps perfectly onto the research from Vittoria Pi at the Donders Institute. Her PNAS paper tracked this exact
I
phenomenon.
did, yeah.
She noted that memory contributes to sentences while they are still in the making.
Which was a massive disruption to how linguists historically mapped the brain.
How so?
Well, for decades, the dominant model treated language as this isolated supreme system. Memory was just viewed as a subordinate tool like a static dictionary that the language system would occasionally access when it needed to look up a difficult word.
But Pi and Robert Knight over at UC Berkeley argue that language evolved in a brain that was already equipped with complex learning and memory structures.
Exactly.
Language isn't the master system. It's a relatively recent interface that relies entirely on our memory architecture.
Memory is the foundation. It's a real-time component. You process every incoming word through the immediate lens of your past sensory experiences. The language system literally cannot function without constantly leaning on memory.
You know, that historical view of language as an isolated system also gave us that famous myth about localization.
Oh, right.
We've all seen those brain diagrams pointing to a tiny, brightly colored region in the left hemisphere, usually Broca's or Wernicke's area, claiming this is where language lives.
Yeah, that localized model dominated neuroscience for a very long time. But the 2016 Nature paper by Alexander Huth and his team fundamentally dismantled it.
They created a map, right?
They did. They mapped out where meaning actually resides across the cortex.
And they did this by putting people in fMRI scanners and having them listen to hours of natural narrative stories. Just standard podcasts and radio shows.
Yes. So instead of testing isolated words in a sterile lab setting, they tracked blood flow in the brain as subjects processed complex, continuous narratives.
That's a much better way to test real-world language.
Exactly. And they built a three-dimensional semantic map of the brain based on those responses. What they found was shocking. Processing a single word doesn't just light up one isolated node in the temporal lobe.
Not at all.
The concept memories triggered by a single word spread rapidly across both hemispheres of the brain.
The spread is incredible. I want to share the examples from the text because they really make this concrete. Take the word T-O-P. T-O-P.
Good example.
When a subject heard that word, the fMRI didn't just show activity in a single dictionary definition area. The scanner lit up in brain regions associated with clothing like wearing a top.
Right.
It lit up in regions associated with buildings and locations, like the top floor. It activated areas related to numbers, lists, and achievements.
The word essentially acts like a master key. It doesn't just unlock one door. It simultaneously unlocks a vast, multi-hemisphere network of every context you've ever associated with the sound.
And a word like mother creates an even wider web.
Oh, absolutely.
It activates massive regions dedicated to family, caregiving, Mother's Day. But because it lights up all those distinct conceptual areas at once, it creates a web that allows for instant associations in totally different categories.
Right, like metaphors.
Yeah. That massive activation is why we instantly understand a concept like a mothership in a science fiction movie, even if we've never seen one. The core semantic traits of origin and protection or a womb are already lit up across the cortex.
The maps generated by Huth's team illustrate a brain that is just profoundly interconnected. Meanings are not stored in neat little files. They are smeared across the cortex in this highly organized but incredibly vast network.
So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at the sheer scale of the computational power we've discussed today, when you hear a single word, your brain isn't just looking up a dictionary definition.
Far from it.
It is acting like a massive switchboard. It takes a single input and instantly lights up entire city blocks of sensory experience, emotion, and historical context across both hemispheres.
Yeah.
And it is doing this translation 10 to 30 times a second, entirely below the surface of your conscious awareness, just so you can understand a simple sentence.
It really forces you to respect the staggering computational load required just to have a casual conversation. You're constantly rendering and re-rendering a highly personalized reality based on acoustic triggers.
It's the hidden architecture of your reality. I mean, think about it. Every article you read, every meeting you prep for, every conversation you have is entirely dependent on this invisible, lightning-fast web of unconscious memories.
It is. But taking that a step further, it leaves us with a fascinating philosophical problem to ponder.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if our entire ability to comprehend language relies on automatically filling in the blanks from our own prior memories, our own personal archive of sand and sun, so to speak, how do we ever truly understand a completely unprecedented concept?
Wow, that is a great question.
Right. If you are introduced to an idea that has absolutely no pre-existing sensory memories to anchor it, how does your brain build that new concept from scratch?
How do you imagine a color you've never seen, or a physics concept that breaks all the rules of your sensory experience?
Exactly.
That is something to chew on. Next time you read a word you've never encountered before, pay close attention to what your brain desperately tries to connect it to. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.